John Green had a new book released this year, so of course I had to read it. Everything Is Tuberculosis: The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection. Only John could get me to read a book about tuberculosis, let me tell you. There's only 3 things I knew about tuberculosis before reading this book. 1, it exists. In college, I learned that tuberculosis and consumption are the same thing. And 3, it really sucks to have. I definitely stood to learn a lot from this book, to say the least. Now, before we get into it, I thought I would mention my cute little earrings. I feel like I have the best earrings for this video. I don't know if it's gonna be in focus, camera, but it is for the tarot card, The Lovers, but it's 2 skeletons, which I'm like, oh my God, that is so perfect for a video on tuberculosis. Because if you don't know, society back in the day thought that tuberculosis tended to go hand in hand with like artistic genius and like poetic ennui. And so, The Lovers, skeletons. I was proud of myself. I thought about that like 20 minutes ago. So please applaud, please compliment. And then also, I thought of this right before filming, that I have some Keats & Co. tea. So this is the Evening Song Chai, and I like it with a little bit of honey. And it is Hank and John Green's tea company, non-spawned, but willing to sell out. So hit me up. Okay, so I'm going to start with just the synopsis, because professionals were paid to write that, and it's good. Tuberculosis has been entwined with humanity for millennia. Once romanticized as a malady of poets, today tuberculosis is seen as a disease of poverty that walks the trails of injustice and inequity we blazed for it. In 2019, author John Green met Henry Ryder, a young tuberculosis patient at Laka Government Hospital in Sierra Leone. John became best friends with Henry, a boy with spindly legs and a big, goofy smile. In the years since that first visit to Laka, Green has become a vocal advocate for increased access to treatment and wider awareness of the healthcare inequalities that allow this curable, preventable, infectious disease to also be the deadliest, killing over 1 million people every year. In Everything Is Tuberculosis, John tells Henry's story, woven through with the scientific and social histories of how tuberculosis has shaped our world and how our choices will shape the future of tuberculosis. In case you're curious, look at these fun little end papers for the book. And then there's the cover. And so I would like to start, I guess, at the beginning, because that's a good place to start, and say that this is an excellent primer for those who are not very savvy in the sciences, don't know much about tuberculosis. It is the perfect little book, very, very reasonably sized, to give you a bunch of different angles to have a really well-rounded sense of both where we've come from with understanding this disease and the possible treatments around it to modern day. And he does a great job of humanizing the struggle of people who have TB. You're given Henry's story, which is part of the synopsis, but you also get part of the story of his mom, being a mom of someone who has TB, and a bit about his dad and like his struggles with it, and some other TB survivors as well. And so I think that's so crucial, because the science is great. The science and history are interesting, but in order to motivate action, I think that emotional element needs to come into play. That it's important to have the pathos for these people that, you know, if you're living in a quote unquote first world country like America, you probably don't know anyone who has TB, at least not active TB. That was another interesting thing about like learning about this. And I'm like, ugh. It is estimated that 1/3 to 1/4 of people in the world have tuberculosis. It's just not been activated. It's like a sleeper cell. That was a bit scary. That's not the best statistic to hear. And the fact that it is curable. There is treatment that is known to cure TB patients. And yet we let over 1 million people each year die. That was a hard pill to swallow. Not as hard as the TB pills, but pretty hard. Really devastating because it's hurting the most vulnerable people. And a lot of the things that trigger tuberculosis to become active, one of them is malnutrition. Like a good chunk of I think the 10 million people who had TB in 2023 were people who were hungry. And that's the only difference between it staying inactive and it being triggered. And then the fact that it's so hard to get the medicine and supplies over there, partly because these crazy companies decide to make crazy prices for their medication. It's one thing if there's a disease out there that we don't have a cure for. It sucks, but I'm not a STEM girly. I'm not going to be fixing that problem. No cure's coming from me. It's another thing when there is a cure. There's a known cure. There's treatments that work. I think we all have to take some accountability and be like, okay, what can I do about this? Because it's about access at this point. So who can I help support through money or word of mouth? John makes a great point of even if you don't care about human beings, diseases don't know anything about boundaries and borders, and it will go everywhere. And more drug-resistant TB hurts everyone. As we learned from COVID, it will just go any which way it feels like. And, countries be damned. It wants to visit everywhere. And unfortunately, since the publishing of this book, the American government has just made things worse. Because all of the funds they've cut, all of the freezing they've done on foreign aid and things like that is only going to see a rise in not only deaths, but drug-resistant TB. It really is up to us to find avenues to fight TB and to get that medicine in the hands of the people who need it. Thanks for letting me be on my soapbox. I know there's going to be a good chunk of people who maybe watch this, but are not going to find time to read the book. And for me, that's the biggest takeaway. Millions of people are dying from this, and they don't have to. There's a cure, there's a treatment, so we really need to get our shit together. And for those of us that do have the privilege of more resources, to do what we can, even if it's just word of mouth, even if it's spreading this video, even if it's buying this book, giving it to someone, whatever. Another plus side for this book is that John is such a realistic yet hopeful dude. And I think that's so important when you're talking about something as serious as the most deadly infection of all of human history. Ultimately, John really believes that humans can do good things as much as we can do bad things. And in this day and age, that is a hope and optimism that I need and need to constantly be reinforcing. As a person who's done the amount of research he has, for him to still be like, we can do it, guys. We can do a good thing here, was very motivating and encouraging, even amongst the not so great news. The other thing is, and I don't know, it's nonfiction. Are there spoilers in nonfiction? But Henry lives. Henry lives. So that's a positive note. You get people who are survivors. It's not all darkness at the end of the tunnel. Also, as a girly who loves random trivia facts, John has you covered. He has such quirky little tidbits and trivia, as well as bigger historical things, like the fact that part of the reason New Mexico became a state is because they took in tuberculosis patients so that they would have enough white English-speaking population that Congress would allow it. Several towns and cities only exist because they became places for tuberculosis patients to rest up and get better. World War I was influenced because the FARC that started the war, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, was successful because of 3 young boys with TB. You got a lot going on in this book. It's navigating quite a bit. I think that's super cool that in such a small amount of space, you're getting the sites, you're getting the history, you're getting, in some ways, a little bit memoir of John's experience going to Sierra Leone and meeting Henry for the first time, him talking to Henry and his mother and different conversations about stuff. John's been instrumental along with Nerd Fighters. Yeah. For those who don't know, John and Hank Green have a YouTube channel. They call their audience Nerd Fighters. They work together to help put pressure on the drug company Danaher to reduce the price of their TB medication. So, yay, go us, go nerds. So that's, again, just nice to hear, something going good. But I think the most fascinating thing for me isn't even the book, but how this book came to be. I find it so interesting how the world works and how all these things had to come together for this book to exist. So for those who don't know, John Green has been an author for a minute, for a long minute, but he spent most of his writing career as a young adult author of such things as The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Pound. A lot of these have gone on to not only be really successful as books, but have a successful movie and TV show adaptation. And this is only his second nonfiction book. John, in so many ways, is the perfect advocate for this work because he's got the platform, he's got the prestige. Not only does he have a built-in audience, but he was able to showcase not only his massive success in young adult, but his successful transition into nonfiction with his last book, The Anthropocene Reviewed. And so the publishing industry knew, like, okay, we can just let this man publish whatever and it's going to work out. Not to mention, John Green has OCD, and part of his obsessive thinking has to do with germs and bacteria. So how wild for this person who struggled their whole life pretty much with this deep concern for diseases, infections, bacteria, to become like the leading activist in fighting TB. And he was a chaplain, I think, at a hospital with people who were deeply unwell, which is part of what inspired him for Fault in Our Stars. But I think is also what gives him this lens of radical hope and also deep concern and empathy and all the things you need to be invested for 3+ years in tuberculosis, in patients, in the treatment, all that stuff. That's not so fun all the time. Finally, he met Henry, a boy with TB in Sierra Leone who has the same name and had a lot of commonalities with John's son. Now, it's always fascinating. There's always an interconnect between a lot of people who become strong advocates or activists and a personal connection. But the struggle around TB and the injustice of TB had to land in John's orbit. And so this connection is what was like the final check mark to what would later become this book. And so I think it makes perfect sense for Henry to be playing a massive part in the story of this. But I also think it's so crucial to it because people in America probably don't know anyone who has TB. Like John mentions in the book, he's like, I thought it was a thing of the past. I didn't know like modern day people were dying of this, much less 1 million people in 1 year. We can be really out of touch with the rest of the world. We can be really isolated in our own bubble of our own like first world concerns that we don't even realize the gravity and the depth of injustice that's happening when it comes to poverty, both here and in the rest of the world, because there's so many things that can seem insurmountable. People going hungry, like war, like all sorts of calamity that as an individual person, you're like, what can I possibly do about this? But the nail in the coffin of knowing, like, we solved this decades ago. Like we not only have treatments, we also have like secondary treatments for those who have one or more drug resistant elements of TB. But it only works if we all work together to make sure people get it. It really made me as a reader question, what am I doing? What am I spending my time on? And how can I get involved? It's up to the individuals now to be like, no, we're concerned about this. No, we mean business. We want this to change. To get, governments and corporations to do the right thing. So there we go. It's a good read. I'd highly recommend it. He has a very casual, accessible language in it. I've also heard the audiobook is good, but even if you don't read it, I would challenge you to walk away from this video thinking of how you can promote more awareness, because I think the reason certain injustices like this remain is because us average folks don't know about it. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time for hopefully a happier read. Bye.